Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And the American Home Bank, a nationally chartered and FDIC-insured, yet locally owned and operated bank in central Pennsylvania. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. In this segment, Maura and I are going to be interviewing Scott Conklin, state representative from Center County. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
so
to be
nice
here.
to have you, and of course the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Goodness, we wanted to start out, I guess, with the same question we started out with Jim Cawley, and that is, what are your qualifications to become Lieutenant Governor? Certainly the one thing that you seem to not bring with you is you are not from the eastern part of the state, and your running mate's from the western part of the state. There's always that balancing act that goes on in the construction of a ticket.
I'm the anomaly in the race. Not only am I from central Pennsylvania, which mathematically should be impossible to be here, I wasn't endorsed by Ed Randell. I'm not a lawyer. I'm the only one that isn't a lawyer. In fact, I don't even have a college education. I'm a trade school, blue collar, through and through, and I'm proud of it. I tell folks all the time that my mother still lives in a mobile home in a mobile home park. And the reason I tell them that is that it comes from different. I grew up believing that calluses build character, that folks of privilege is very well, but at the same time, you have to understand where the people are coming from. I grew up in the trades, self-employed, had a construction business, had 27 employees, became a county commissioner in 1999, chaired the prison board for years, chaired the statewide courts and corrections for the County Commissioners Association, actually did the prison overcrowding study. I was fortunate enough to, as they say, be taught by some of the best in the state. And that would be whether overseeing the nursing home, overseeing the prison, overseeing emergency management. It gave me a great grasp of the issues, and I had a lot of good people that I depended on that were able to teach me. As a legislator, we've continued that. When you look at when we came in '06, we did the 31 reform measures, stopped the 2 a.m. voting, have the open records, so folks like yourself no longer have to search for where we spend our money. You can just go get it, and you can either praise us or do the opposite. But that's entirely up to you. But government isn't about being entitled. Government is about working for the people. And my background is totally different from the other people running, but at the same time, I bring it with pride.
Well, I understand that you and Mr. Honorato are a little bit superstitious, and you haven't talked much about the role that you would play as Lieutenant Governor. So let's talk in broad terms about what sort of role you think a Lieutenant Governor should play in an administration.
Well, let's start. I'm the superstitious one.
You're the superstitious one.
And
okay.
It was said tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
When Mr. Honorato and I have talked, what our role will be is that he wants me to work hard. He's planning on having me as that conduit between the legislative body. As you know, over the last few administrations, there's been a huge disconnect between the legislative body and the governor's office. It's sad but true. At the end of the day, many governors forget that the legislative body is an equal part of a three-part structure. What he's planning for me to do is not only do my day-to-day roles, which I've done every one of them, whether it's being in a legislative body overseeing emergency management or overseeing the pardons or courts and corrections, but what he's expecting me to do and demanding of me is that I'm not going just to be there to do the dinners. I'm there to work from 6 a.m. till midnight or whatever time it takes to help with the legislation process. I know the players. I know on both sides of the board who they are. In fact, it's not uncommon to see me out with my Republican colleagues having a burger at Five Guys. I don't do the fancy dress scene downtown. I do the, if you want to work, we're going to go to work, and if you want to meet afterwards, we'll go out and we'll do it as friends. And that's how I was as a commissioner, that's how I am as a legislator. So he's depending on me to use my background with the good Republican legislators, with the good Democratic legislators to push legislation through.
Mm-hmm. One of the largest challenges and most immediate challenge to any administration that comes into office next year here in Harrisburg will be the state budget. Of course, Governor Rendell announced several weeks prior to the enactment of the budget that he wants to get out of here. And it seems that this budget that has been agreed upon was just a postponement of consideration of many inevitable issues that are upon us. How would you and Mr. Honorado deal with perhaps the $5 billion hole that is confronting any new administration?
You better be ready to go to work. You can't use fancy lines. You know, everybody says, I'm going to cut, waste and fraud. It's a great catchword. It's like saying, I'm for clean air and fresh water. That's great. But at the end of the day, you can't say, go to my website. You better be able to answer some questions. You better be able to answer hard. And you better be able to take on the tough decisions and the tough advocates who are advocating on behalf of their industry. At the end of the day, we have to lower the corporate tax. And we have to lower it considerably, but we have to close the loophole. It's not fair
the Delaware loophole.
Yeah, 70% of the corporations in Pennsylvania do not pay corporate tax. Do not pay it.
Because they have a post office box.
That's exactly right.
In Wilmington, Delaware.
And it's not fair to those who are doing business honestly in Pennsylvania. That's the first thing. The second thing we have to look at is where the grant money is going. When I sit on budget and finance. When I ask exactly who's getting this grant money and are they Pennsylvania companies, they can't tell you that answer. They can't even tell you if those companies are paying taxes in Pennsylvania. We can't have that. Then what we have to do, everyone talks about Jack Wagner as he's a god. I stay at the same motel as Jack Wagner does. The man is smart. We have to implement some of his programs. And then we also have to look at different ways.
Jack Wagner is, of course, the Auditor General.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And then we have to look at how we do business in Pennsylvania. One of the things we have to stop, and the reason people hear me calling for the Constitutional Convention to get it out of the hands of politicians and in the hands of the people, is that we have to stop these no-bid contracts. We have to stop an RCAP that isn't designated. When you see money going out for projects that isn't in the budget, but it's discretionary to the governor, you can't allow that. You have to rein that in. You have to do a lot of different ways we do business. When I was a county commissioner for 7 years, we took the county the best financial rating in history. The reason I say we is that nobody does it alone. When I left county commissioner, I left with a $12 million surplus, not a deficit. Every governor, when you look in history going back, it seems like there's a deficit at the end. So now what we have to do is to get past what people want to do for the political reasons and understand that you do have a job to do here and you have a job to make those tough decisions. There are going to be sound bites put against you. There are going to be negative ads put against you, but you better be willing to make those tough votes.
Well, I think that we discussed this a little bit with Mr. Cawley, and that is jobs. It's the big issue. What are your plans for the average viewer out here in terms of finding jobs?
Well, let's start with the fact that I come from central Pennsylvania, the only candidate in probably many years who will hold this position who was elected from central Pennsylvania. So I come from the coal region. I've seen what unregulated growth done at any cost is done. You can't fish in the streams, they're orange. You can't plow the fields because they've been torn apart. So we have a great resource called the Marcellus shale. The gas companies want to see a severance fee put in it. They're asking for it because they want the folks to be able to get the permits done, and they want to be able to go out and they do a good job. They're tired of the folks coming in not doing a good job. So we're going to build on this Marcellus shale. We're going to use our technical schools, which have been involved in for many years, to train our Pennsylvania employees to make those Pennsylvania jobs. When you ask people when they pay the $52 tax that 118 out of 120 from out of state, that's not acceptable. We're going to make sure they're Pennsylvania jobs. We're going to clean up our brownfields. We're going to go to the old industrial sites across the state. And we're going to continue to do what Dan Honorado did in Pittsburgh and what we were able to do in Center County. We're going to take those old abandoned factories. We're going to get them ready for new business. Government can't create a job, but we can put the infrastructure in place, the water lines, the sewer lines, because Pennsylvania has the best workforce in the world today. We're going to capitalize on that. We're going to lower the corporate tax. We're going to invest in our small business, which creates about 80% of the jobs. I'm a small businessman. We work very hard. People say about taxes, I paid 3.07. You know what hurts us the most? Property taxes. My business is most affected by a property tax. We employ about 7 people. We have a small retail store. My property taxes. So let's come up with a solution in the 21st century. Look what Sam Rohr's talking about. Look what other folks are talking about. And let's put everything on the table. But also, Let's give small business the incentives they need to stay in business by giving them the tools. Let's not cut the small business accounts that come in and help folks like myself with weatherization programs, with accounting programs. They're vital. If you want to make Pennsylvania strong, you have to make the people strong, and you got to make the businesses strong.
Well, one of the questions that we asked Mr. Cawley was indeed about the fact that for at least a generation there have been two Pennsylvanias, and you've acknowledged that you come from the second Pennsylvania. We have southeastern Pennsylvania and we have the Pittsburgh region that do relatively well economically, and even they are struggling. As Billy Joel's song Allentown acknowledged a long time ago, along with the deindustrialization throughout the United States. But in northern Pennsylvania and western Pennsylvania, when you go into wide stretches, for example, of Sullivan County, there are no businesses. There's local service industries and there's agriculture, a little bit of tourism, and that's it. There are no jobs for anyone there. What can you and Dan Honorado do to help the western parts of the state, the northern parts of the state, with the exception of Marcellus Shale? Marcellus Shale isn't going to last forever, of course.
No, you have a 50 to 75 year window on that industry, and it's going to be, there's 2 or 3 generations will benefit from it. But what folks always have to remember, first off, what built America was Pittsburgh. The steel mills, Johnstown, Allentown, that's what built this country. As we've changed the economy since NAFTA came in, since other things have come in that many of us have disagreed with the way it's happened, but it's made our local folks aren't able to compete for reasons beyond their control. Let's go back to what we were talking about. Let's invest in these plants that have closed down. Let's make them shovel ready. We're in a competition. We're in a competition with Alabama. We're in a competition with Texas. We're in a competition with other states, let alone the rest of the world. So folks say you can't create a job at government. No, you make a job from an atmosphere. Let's lower the corporate tax. What we talked about a few minutes ago. Let's clean up those brownfields. Let's train our workers. Let's invest in them. We've invested in our pre-K counts program in 2006. I'm proud to be part of that. Our test scores are increasing. Let's move on. We can't keep incarcerating folks. I know it's the #1 business in Pennsylvania. It's becoming the #1 business. It's not the #1, but it's becoming #1 business. We're the only state in the nation that increased our incarceration last year, while other states have actually decreased. We have to look at different ways to put Pennsylvania forward, and we have to do it by investing in our communities, investing in the infrastructure, lower our corporate tax, and we have to be ready to put the dollars out there to bring a company into Pennsylvania with caveats. That they stay, that they don't come, take the money and move on. So how many times have you all seen a company get that grant money, build that plant, make an extra $1 million, next thing you know they close it and move somewhere else?
So let me ask you what you see as the biggest distinction between your new administration and the other administration. What would you see as the biggest distinction between the two of you?
In a minute.
Ourselves between the Randall administration and the
I mean in the new administration. If you take over versus
for myself,
the Cawley administration.
He's planning on putting me to work. I'm proud of my background. I understand the political end, but I also understand the business end. I've been a businessman for 30 years. I know what businesses want. I've been involved in the training systems for 20 years. I'm going to be a hands-on. You're not going to see me sitting up waiting to be called to come to a dinner. You're going to see me on the job sites. You're going to see me in the training centers. You're going to see me with legislators, ushering good legislation through. We're planning on working hard. There's 24 hours in a day, and we're not going to waste one of them.
Okay. Well, we have wished your opponent and his running mate well. We want to wish you and your running mate well, and we look forward to having all of you back after the election at some point and reflecting on the election and the direction that Pennsylvania will be taking in the future. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm anxious to be back.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll be back with another edition of Behind the Headlines next week. We'll see you then.